people to look at the podcast crew and just really get some ideas. That you can also listen and tune in on Linktree at the Crew Podcast, and correct myself, DACREWPODCAST 23. I think it's important for persons to really listen, tune in. So our time zones, it's 8 p.m. Atlantic and Eastern because we're on the same time now. And of course, that's 5 p.m. in the Pacific, and you can do the math in between. We have some of our sisters and brothers that are tuning in from the UK, and that's 5 hours later. So that would actually be at 1 a.m. And then we have some of our brothers and sisters tuning in from Tanzania, which is 7 hours ahead. So that too brings us into a space of 3 a.m. So we really want to be able to identify a couple of things. I'm very grateful. Thank you for putting the Facebook pages on here as well as the YouTube pages here. And we're encouraging people, you can go to AST Speaks, ASTSPEAKS, AST Speaks on YouTube as well as on Facebook. You can also go to my Chinzera Kahina page so that way you can tune in and share with some of the others in your respective community. But I wanted to take some time tonight. Usually I have guests, and literally I've been traveling for over 20 hours. And when I hit the ground here in II St. Croix, I've been working at the Bambula Journeys exhibition that I've curated at the Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts that opened with a wonderfully welcoming reception on July 6th, last Saturday before last. And it was a wonderful opportunity for all of us to really look into a couple of areas around what is Bambula Journey, what does that mean, and what is Bambula? Because Bambula is not only the music, the dance, song. Bambula is a way that we communicate, a way that we bring truth to power in how we engage with one another so that we can highlight a couple of things. So I'll share this with our beloved viewers and listeners that comes from the Bambula Journeys. And this particular exhibition, Bambula Journeys, is highlighted around a very rich, retrospective, indigenous, Caribbean, cultural, African arts exhibition. So it's from my private collection, which includes some of my private work. And as people see me as an artist, more so as a performing artist or as a filmmaker or as an author, as a poet, as a spoken word author, I love to paint, I love photography, and I love putting my photographs in different mediums and mixing it up a bit so that way people can have the experience, the immersion of what I see through my lens, coming from my heart, coming from my spiritual spaces. And Bambula, and I share this quote that's part of the exhibition, Bambula is more than a representation of music, dance, song, theater. Bambula represents more than a dance step style for performance and public entertainment. I want to make sure persons hear that. It represents a socio-cultural, a socio-political, a psycho-spiritual exchange and engagement that fuses body, mind, spirit, and consciousness with sacred traditions, inspirational vision, and freedom from physical, mental, and spiritual bondage on a multiplicity of dimensions. This so the persons get an idea of what we speak of. And I encourage people, just put in Bambula. You can probably put in Bambula per Unc, Bambula I Speaks, or Bambula Dr. Chinzera in Google Scholar, Metacrawler, or any search engine, and it will actually provide you with an opportunity to really see and a couple of things in our forefront so that I have people that are trying to tune into the broadcast with me live here. And I think that it's important to let people know that some of our conversations are for us to be able to talk about the energy, the love, the respect that we have for one another. I think it's also important for persons to get an idea that this collaborative art exhibition that is done at the Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts, and I encourage people go to cmcarts.org, and you will be able to get a very wonderful infusion and experience of some of the things that are happening right here on the Isle of St. Croix that actually bring the arts, education, culture, heritage, historic preservation, edification, spirituality, jazz, all forms of music, and of course, dance in a very respectful, very engaging way. I think it's really important to let people know that some of the work that we're doing here is around our ability to highlight some of these conversations that we have around the enlightenment, the aspirations of how we begin to offer all of our skills, talents, and expertise here as aspiring authors. So I'm really excited and looking forward to the Footsteps publication because that brings a number of areas to, and they're reminding me that I'm here multitasking. So I'm really grateful that our viewers and listeners can hear in the background. We're actually here at 6-9 Restaurant here in Frederickstead, Freedom City, St. Croix, and they've been very kind to give me my own little studio space in the middle of the restaurant so that I can actually continue to share during this particular broadcast. I think it's important to highlight a couple of things that are also taking place uh, alongside these programs. There was a wonderful regional youth conference on reparations that was hosted by the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, their Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. And this was put together through the Trinidad and Tobago reconstituted National Committee on Reparations. And so this regional youth conference on reparations with a theme of reparations for transformation. Featured speaker included Senator Genevieve Whitaker, president and co-founder of the Virgin Islands Youth Advocacy Coalition. I get the honor and privilege of serving on their advisory council as well. It was also presentations and powerful dialogue and very powerful programs recommended by Amandla Thomas Johnson, a journalist, activist, and author. And he was doing this even on the heels of providing disaster recovery efforts for his family in Union Island, 95% destruction from Hurricane Beryl in the Grenadines. We're also joined by Kibwe Copeland, president of Ikemba Youth for Reparations, again, giving some wonderful context to what the younger generations are spearheading and putting forward around reparatory justice, repatriation, restitution, and reparations in general, not only in the Caribbean, but showing it from a global space. And again, going beyond just the check, but going into the resource development, the fund organization, strategic planning and management, edification of our systems of learning and cognition, engagement in agriculture, agritourism, agribusiness, looking at economic development from a space of empowerment, not begging and asking for support, but those exchanges that allow for us to really have prosperity and peace and much more. We were also joined by Adeola Young, a sociologist of the CAFRATT. I think it's really important. There were several different organizations represented, and also Dr. Tayimba Salandi, who is the director of the IKER Institute in Trinidad and Tobago. But I want to highlight that while this took place on July 11th in a virtual space, there were so many opportunities that were shared in regard to what is taking place with young people being at the forefront and authentically resuming or maintaining their role as the sparks of revolution, the sparks of transformation, the sparks of change, the sparks of growth, the sparks of civilization building. And I was so honored to hear the expertise, the attention to standards of excellence that were exceptional, the programmatic elements of what is to be done and how it is to be done, and most importantly, that security and safety. Let me be more specific: executive security and safety for any of us that are stepping up, stepping forward, and bringing these truths into the light, that was also highlighted because many of us have done this work, and I can speak for myself, have done this work for decades, and it's not always easy. When we speak out against false incarceration, many of our brothers and sisters that are incarcerated, placed in prison, charged with crimes they never committed. And if they did commit a crime, it was all in self-defense to protect life, self, family, community, and they're still incarcerated. These are things, when you speak out, you become a target. When we speak of protecting our women and girls that are being kidnapped, tortured, raped, murdered throughout the world, we can speak for what's happening in the 48 contiguous U.S., and it's equally happening in Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, maybe not as often, maybe not reported as often, South America, Central America, Europe, Africa, Indonesia, the Pacific Isles, the world. When we speak out about these injustices against our women and girls, the forced marriages, the abuse, sometimes we become the target. So I thought it was powerful to see certain convenings that highlighted the importance of executive security and the safety of we who speak truth to power, we who speak out and go beyond even saying me too, but actually engage in actionable deliverable that allow us to restore our shared humanity and our safety and our security and our power and much, much more. So if you notice that people start coming in and I change the background, it's because I'm actually at a gathering for scholars that are here, and I need to be very clear, returning to our island community of II St. Croix here in the Virgin Islands of the United States. So you'll hear me say VI-us or VIUS, Virgin Islands, us. And I highlight that all the time because there's a number of brothers and sisters, scholars from the University of California, Stanford University, and other institutions that are here working with our intergenerational community to begin to give oral histories and gather oral histories and to document them from some of our cultural tradition bearers, our historic preservationists, our naturalists, our scientists, our marine biologists, our scuba divers, our youth, our educators, our artisans, our artists, our metallurgists, and all in between that are being able to give some context, some true context to what is involved in culture, healing, arts, technology, and spirituality that support life here in II, St. Croix, Virgin Islands. And how do we extend that throughout our Caribbean region, throughout the Americas, throughout this hemisphere, and of course, globally. And I know I've covered a lot of different things, but I really desired to just let persons know we have had so many pieces going on recently. For those persons that are not familiar with the Atacare International Development Organization, I want to take a moment so that persons know that when we speak of the IDO network, and it's a pretty interesting gathering of brothers and sisters from around the globe, grounded in more than 700, make sure you hear me, more than 700 African royal kingdoms and realms, with a membership of over 1 million persons. And I know that sounds like a lot, and it probably will throw off a lot of people, but I want to make sure that persons can take their time. I've added that into the chat as well, so you can go to the idonetwork.org and learn a little bit more about the IDO community to just get an idea of exactly, what is IDO, how do we engage in an international space. And I want to just share this for the purposes of persons that may not have gone to the site. But the IDO Network International is a nonprofit organization headquartered in London with chapters and affiliated traditional leaders and kingdoms in several countries in Africa that promotes peace and respect through culture as a means for unity and sustainable development. The objective of IDO, among others, because there's quite an extensive list of objectives, is to uphold the spirit of Ubuntu, humanity, human rights, we are because you are, and promote social inclusion across all communities everywhere. I think it's really important to know that there are connections and chapters of the IDO network international that are in Europe, as well as in Africa, as well as in the Caribbean. Yes. And that there's also the global African diaspora kingdom that brings together a council, a supreme council of brothers and sisters, royals, that are reinstituting our royalty and our regality in the African diaspora. So there's a lot that I can speak to in that regard. And I think it's important to know that this gives us an opportunity to bring a voice to the voiceless. It allows us to engage cultural role models that promote unity and social change. This is an organization that encourages stakeholders to embrace the vision of corporate social responsibility. I can refer to it as CSR, corporate social responsibility in culture, grounding these things in culture so that we can strengthen and foster networks and share good practices, not just best practices, but holistic good practices internationally. And again, I encourage you to go to IDO Network, AIDO Network.org, and that way you can learn a little bit more about some of the efforts, some of the global projects, some of the ways in which cultural heritage is promoted, the way that capacity building activities that empower communities are engaged, how there are a number of global campaigns that advocate for human rights on all levels, that there are networks that provide lobbying support and developments of various partnerships and collaborations, as well as the advancement of informal as well as formal education in our respective communities, as well as the connection to sustainable development programs. So in addition to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, there are a host of other extensions of those SDGs that are highlighted through the work of IDO. I think it's important to also look at some of the strategic goals of IDO in regard to the promotion of cultural heritage preservation and the documentation and intercultural exchange. Also, the delivery of very impactful social and economic programs in collaboration with education, health, inequality, peace, justice, and of course, strong institution building and development. And then, of course, we do our best to increase our partnerships, our collaborations, our cooperative arrangements and engagements so that we are always strengthening our IDO membership internationally. So if you're interested in being part of a network where we actually do, and we speak of I doers, and contribute in always large, always small, please feel free to go to the IDO network. And you can easily go to idonetwork.org. For the next part of tonight's broadcast, I'd like to make sure that I highlight a number of things that have been very supporting here within the Aspiring Authors Magazine initiative brought forth by Sister Queen Angela and supported by more than 24 authors with the publication that's forthcoming. And I know that there are opportunities for us to learn a little bit more. I'm so excited to see this anthology of poetic verse that is brought together, oh, approximately 30 authors in this publication that's forthcoming. We're excited because persons are talking about love, people are speaking about change, people are speaking about spirituality, people are speaking about so many different themes that allow for each and every one of us to highlight a number of things in our context and how we bring these things into power. I would be remiss if I didn't encourage people to also learn a little bit more about the Omani Kingdom, as I mentioned earlier. I will put that into the chat as well because that way you can have your own opportunity at your leisure to learn more about the Omani Royal Kingdom uh, with her Royal Majesty, Queen Vicky Lexar, and you'll get to see some of the global engagements that they're involved in and thus the legacy, because I think it's important to recognize that this unity and reconciliation, the Omani legacy, was really highlighted in their inaugural magazine. I think that was the Omani Royal Kingdom magazine that came out with their first issue in spring of 2024. It's really powerful. You can go to the site and get a digital copy for you to peruse and see freely. I think it's really important, and I'll put that link in the chat as well so that persons would be able to just learn a little bit more about the esteemed Omani Royal Kingdom and under the very, quote, capable leadership of Her Royal Majesty, Queen Vicky Lextar. And just knowing, for those persons that aren't as familiar, like, what does that mean? We have an actual Royal Majesty in our midst. Her royal lineage stems from the Dowuona royal family of Osun and the Okang Mashi royal family of Jarese La in Ghana, West Africa. And so that way you can go to the website and learn a little bit more to just keep yourself informed, keep yourself engaged, and let's understand that the connections that they have to what is rooted in our people, in our ethnicity, in our gender, in our diversity, in our socioeconomic backgrounds, in our sociocultural spaces, and just that whole idea of initiating change, challenging bias, and I quote, fostering shared values. So there's a lot more when you get the chance to meet the Okang royal family, and you'll just get an idea of how diversity, equity, inclusion, spiritual harmony and collaboration actually are exemplified within the Omani Royal Kingdom. I think it's really important for persons to just take a moment and learn as much as you can to be comfortable because their focus is on health, education, leadership, and community development. Sounds familiar. Health, education, leadership, and community development. And that gives us an opportunity to really speak volumes in regard to some of the things that we'd like to highlight in our broadcast tonight. And the idea is for us to be able to share, how do we help our brothers and sisters around the globe? How do we start and strengthen our unity, our harmony, our principled unity, our principled liberating harmony? Today is also a significant day for many. People refer to this day as a day honoring many great ones. We've had a number of observances in the month of July, and sometimes we overlook very significant ones, right? There were a number of activities happening at the United Nations today. I wish to extend a couple of notes of thanks for July 18th being recognized as International Mandela Day in honor of Madiba Nelson Mandela of Azania, South Africa. I'll share the quote that was shared with us. A fundamental concern for others in our individual and community lives would go a long way in making the world the better place we so passionately dream of, unquote. And those are the words of the Honorable Madiba Nelson Mandela on this day that we celebrate his anniversary of his birth. I think it's also important to know that there were a number of pieces. I would be remiss in speaking of IDO, the Atacare International Development Organization Network, and without speaking of the founders and the current president and chair, respectively. And that's none other than His Royal Highness, Papa Atacare Igando Jones, and his beloved Queen, Her Royal Highness Queen Grace Ikano Jones. And they've been really instrumental to the conversations around what IDO presents and produces. I really want you to meet this really pretty princess. Come, because I think it's important that persons know, like, yes, I do a lot of work, and yes, I have a lot of activities that are presenting themselves, but you're going to notice that I'm going to bring in this really cute reason why I can do what I'm doing. Might you come with me? Come, let's see. Might you cry? What do you see? Say good evening. Say hi, everybody. She's looking at her mother, but she's allowing me to hold her. We believe in bringing our children into all elements of our work. So when we're doing these types of podcasts, yes, you got to smile. You're fortunate. Yes, 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 yes. And her mom might, I'm telling you, her mom might join us for a second. Her mom is a phenomenal artist. I just want to highlight, yes. Please tell us your name.
Juliana.
Juliana. I just want to highlight, jeweler out of this world. If you want designs, one of a kind, you have to come to Prussian Heritage and Nature Tourism in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, and get the Juliana experience, right? I just wanted to at least share that. Thank you, tenfold, right? Because we get an opportunity to bring some of our entrepreneurs, our artists, some of our educators, as well as our scholars into this space, into this room. That way we are actually living what we speak of when we talk about building a new legacy. And when we speak of ancestral, ancient, sacred traditions, when we say AST speaks, we're speaking from a space of those ancestral, ancient, sacred traditions in contemporary times. What are the things of the past that are very applicable, useful, and facilitate our growth in contemporary times? So as I was saying, in the midst of all of these other opportunities, we also have, the organizations that were hosting the Mandela event today. Oh, you like being on? I know you like my podcast. I know you would. So now I'm telling you, this means that I may have a new co-host, and she's not quite two yet. But what I love with her energy is that she's really giving us an opportunity to talk about the role of our children, the role of our youth, keeping them engaged, letting them listen to all of this information that we're sharing. So whether it's poetic verse, whether we're speaking about the injustices that need to be repaired so we can restore our shared humanity in our communities, whether it is to support the efforts to cut back and to eradicate violence against women, girls, men, boys. You see how that went? How do we begin to bring this type of conversation in the forefront of some of our discourse? And how do we begin to highlight ways that we can bring our educators, our parents, our wider community, whether they're corporate or not? How do we bring entrepreneurs? How do we bring technical scientists? How do we bring artisans, metallurgists into the circle? And I'm really excited so that way we can spend some quality time bringing all of this together, and how do we bring this together so that we actually show respect and honor to one another? So it's like I try really hard to bring certain things into fruition. And I'm very excited when I have an opportunity to talk about some of the things that I'm doing work on and being able to highlight some of those things. So even the Mandela Day events that were hosted by the African Views Organization, and I'll make sure to put their website in to the hopper as well, because I think sometimes people forget that when we talk about African Views and when we talk about AfricanViews.org, that we're speaking about an organization that has a history of being able to provide some very powerful information around small vision, large vision, expression of thought, what they refer to as global African intelligence. And we really bring that into a focus that allows for us to speak about the different projects that, again, these are going to sound familiar: heritage, economics, health, education. Do you see the synergy? And they have a host of media publications, but I'm also adding that site into our links so that persons can also see that there's a synergy that's happening between different organizations. There are a number of articles that have been shared, regarding some of the recent celebrations, the Golden Jubilee for Her Royal Majesty Queen Vicky Lextar. It makes me almost speechless because it was a showering of an abundance of love and respect, loyalty, and royalty. And I want to make sure I highlight that. The royalty, and maybe you'll hear me say royalty, because it's almost like that needs an extra syllable, because it was exceptional. And the standards of excellence that were exhibited, the hospitality shared and extended to every single guest, every single member of the family, every single member of the Omani Royal Kingdom. It was exceptional. And there are very few opportunities that many of us experience to see that type of love, respect, energy, and exceptional artistic talent. I would like to highlight that. Exceptional artistic, professional talent that was shared through dance, theatrical presentation, poetic delivery, music, the choir, everything exceptional. And I just needed to make sure that and there's more for me to share on that. That'll be another broadcast, because prayerfully we'll be able to have, our intention is to use our platform here on July 31st, which is Pan African Women's Day, around the globe since 1957, before the Organization of African Unity, before the African Union. There was a Pan African Women organization that spearheaded a number of efforts, and that day is highlighted on July 31st, which is powerful because it's right on the eve of many Emancipation Day observances here throughout the Caribbean. Right, August 1st being Emancipation Day from British colonization. In the Virgin Islands, July 3rd is Virgin Islands emancipation from 1848. I think it's just important for people to just get that in their minds. In St. Martin, it's July 1st, same year, 1848, one side, 1863, another side. So I'm just saying this is a time of emancipation and liberation and freedom and decolonization and self-determination from June, the end of June, coming all the way into August, with August 1st being emancipation, as I've mentioned, from the British colonizers. And throughout, there's observances for Marcus Garvey's solar return, birthday anniversary on August 17th. Flag Days, August 13th. There'll be conventions and convenings of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Communities League throughout the globe. I think it's important for persons to be aware that the work of the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, alongside his wife, Amy Jacks Garvey, and his first wife, Amy Ashley Garvey, all founders of UNIAACL, alongside many others. I think it's important to highlight that in 1920, at the convention for the UNIAACL, there was a declaration for Negro people of the world. And in that declaration in August of 1920 at Madison Square Garden on August 31st, there was this powerful declaration, which is available online. I will put that link in our network as well. But what August 31st represents is African Independence Day. I think it's important for persons to know this so that while we're looking at, Labor Day and the 48 contiguous, the first Monday of September every year, that we have all of these other pieces of what led up to that. Here in the Caribbean, we also have West Indian Solidarity Day, which is the same day as U.S. Labor Day, the first Monday of September. So I'm just putting out there so the listeners have that in their reservoir of things to know, things to do. And there's a number of other observances. August 3rd is also the anniversary of the birth of the honorable grandfather of Pan Africanism, the Honorable Reverend Dr. Edward Wilmot Blyden, born in very humble beginnings as a free African on the Isle of St. Thomas in what was then the Danish West Indies, which is now the Virgin Islands of the United States, of parents that were free, not enslaved. They were free, equal persons coming out of West Africa. I just think it's important that we highlight these things as we celebrate and celebrate all these other pieces. So I know I cover quite a bit in a short amount of time. I'm glad that some of our listeners are also tuning into some of the conversations, some of the comments that have been shared, because while there's certain distractions, certain areas that are being prioritized in the 48 contiguous U.S., what we need to navigate and do our best to come together for, let us build principled unity, decolonization, self-determination, liberation, and a form of principled unity that helps us strengthen our shared humanity. If we can do that, if we can do that, get many of these illegally incarcerated prisoners of war out of prison, get the incarceration rates dropped, move people into a space that they can be positive contributors to our communities wherever they are. And for those that choose to repatriate to the motherland or to repatriate out of the 48 contiguous to us, so be it. Everyone deserves peace. Every single one of us deserves peace. And we will not have it if we're continuously at war. So if we can do something to undo the layers of warfare that are really commanding most of our time, that would be ideal as well. So as we get ready to close out for tonight's broadcast, because we are, again, the hour went by really quickly, I want to share some updates on some of the activities and efforts that some of our brothers and sisters, as you've heard me mention, July 31st is the anniversary for the Pan-African Women's Organization, and it's known as Pan-African Women's Day annually from 1957. This preceded the development of the Organization of African Unity, which in the early parts of the 21st century became the African Union. I encourage persons that are not familiar with the African Union to take a moment and please make sure, and it's in English as well as French, Kiswahili, Portuguese, Spanish, and Arabic, so that way you can practice your multilingualism and your language skills, of course, but more importantly, you will also be able to learn a little bit more about the African Union. And the reason I mention that is because as we're speaking in Ghana, there are a host of anniversary activities and a convening of the African Union ECOSOC, which focuses on economic, social, cultural, organizational development and unity. And this is happening in Accra, Ghana, as we speak. And there's also going to be side events that are hosted by the African Union, African Diaspora 6th Region High Council. I think it's really important that they're doing this in the context, as the program shared, of the 20th anniversary. This 2024 marks the 20th anniversary of the African Union ECOSOC. And these side events are grounded on Pan-African root synergy, diaspora affairs. And this is happening, as I said, in Accra, Ghana. That activity will be happening later in the week, but there are a host of activities that are convening starting the 16th through this weekend in Accra, Ghana. I think it's really important for persons to just get an idea of some of the things that are happening with this particular theme for this side event. The theme is advancing the AU-ADS, African Union, African Diaspora High Council, the instruments, partnerships, and leave no community behind model, and the importance of focusing on diaspora citizenship, success, and the right to return through Ubuntu pathways. So that's a side event that'll be happening on Saturday, July 20th. As soon as the repertoire reports are provided for us, we will make sure to share that in our broadcast and our network. I just think it's important to note that there's going to be a various series of addresses provided. You know, the moderator is identified as Mrs. Angela Sales, who is this AU-ADS 6th Region High Council Board member. There will also be King Taki Taiko Tsuri II, Ga Matse, who will be doing an opening prayer and royal welcome. He's a king of Accra, in Accra. There will also be the Honorable Akwasi Ababium, who is serving within the Republic of Ghana. He's the Director of Diaspora Affairs. Wonderful brethren. He's also joined us in the Caribbean on a number of occasions and offered support par excellence. And I want to encourage persons to tune in just to learn more about the right to return welcome statement. The co-founder of the AU-ADS 6th Region High Council and global leading facilitator, Dr. Beryl Bickman. She's going to be setting the tone of empowerment in a statement. The AU ECOSOC Secretariat Representative Bright Sifa, and talking about the AU ECOSOC's 20 years working with the diaspora. And then there's going to be a host of different initiatives. And I want to just take a moment and highlight that. The AU 6th Region High Council leading facilitator, Region North America, Reverend Kobe Little, will be speaking on providing a keynote on the practical implications of the Ubuntu connected philosophy and perspective of the Leave No Community Behind vision. Of course, the co-founder, Dr. Beryl Bickman, will be speaking on the African Union's High Council's governance structure, the idea in perspective of the 2003 adopted Article 3Q of the African Union Constitutive Act. Of course, there will be a Ubuntu-nomics, actualizing the Office of Finance and Diaspora Partnership by Mrs. Angela Sales, again from the AU-ADS 6th Region High Council Board Member and Management Committee, also from the AUDS's High Council, their leading facilitator in Africa, the region ECOWAS, Dr. Michael Nkrumah. He will be speaking on empowering diasporan youth for economic transformation. And then the afternoon shifts into the reparatory justice in perspective of the right to return. And that will be opened by High Council Board member, Mrs. Awa Ndiaye, and she will be sharing a vision statement and a historical perspective. We will have the chairman of the Cultural Committee of the Ghana Global Diaspora Council, Dr. Nee Okwaye Hammond, African, who'll be speaking on African identity, the African kingdoms, and the right to return. We will have another AU-ADS 6th Region leading facilitator for the region of East African Committee, hailing out of Tanzania, as well as Kenya, and as well as Ethiopia, and with very humble beginnings out of Jamaica, none other than Her Excellency Mrs. Nana Abina James, and she'll be speaking on the right to return, pathways for success based on her experience in reparatory justice. And then, of course, there will be a session on the right to return champions of best practices and recommendations for success, closed out by the Republic of Ghana's Director of Diasporic Affairs, the Honorable Akwasi Ababio, as mentioned earlier. And then we will have African Views Ghana, Queen Mother Awandora sharing closing remarks, and of course, Reverend Kobe Little offering closing prayers as they speak of the report on the way forward, conclusions, and recommendations. It's going to be a very full activity. That's part of that program. I encourage persons to go to the African Union ECOSOC site to get some other information. I think it's really important to know some of the areas, the intentions, the growth of what is transpiring. I think that some people forget sometimes that we are really moving in a direction to really shift our relationships with our brothers and sisters in the African continent and beyond. I think it's also important for our community to be very comfortable in knowing that this whole conversation around the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, existing from 1963, coming into the AU and moving into 2023 and beyond, I think it's important to use this as an opportunity to speak on the activities that are happening in Africa and in the world that impact the African diaspora. I think also that this is a wonderful opportunity for persons to know that there are activities happening all through CARICOM, the Caribbean community. I put that website in as well because there's so much happening, whether it's through the CARICOM Reparations Commission, whether it's through the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. And I had to pause because they're doing so much work that I'm just going to put the sites in so persons can at their leisure, because we've come to the close of our broadcast for tonight. But I think it's really important for our sisters and brothers to know that there's a lot that's going on in the world for us to be able to talk about that is happening that's good. There's some wonderful activities that are bringing truth to power, highlighting creatives, culture, heritage, arts, technology, spirituality, wellness, prosperity, peace. And I would like for us to highlight those things instead of just focusing on the warmongering or focusing on the other than honorable negativities that are causing imbalance in our community. We want to send a special shout out to our sisters and brothers again that are getting through disaster recovery efforts in the Caribbean. I've placed some of those sites on our web page as well, because I think it's really important for our brothers and sisters to know that we are doing our best to offer, support, whether it's in Jamaica, whether it's in Grenada, whether it's in St. Vincent Grenadines. We would like brothers and sisters to really hear us when we're saying each one teach one while each one heals. So whatever you can do, whatever you're able to provide support for, even if it's just to go to the Caribbean disaster agencies and learn a little bit more about how you can send donations to different agencies and to different countries. And, if you want something more formal, we'll do our best to keep sending this information, because what's happening is that we're doing our best to offer opportunities for persons to share with us ways that they can share their support to help our sisters and brothers in need in respective countries. With that being said, I think I've reached the time limit for tonight. I really encourage persons to tune in to AST Speaks and Building a New Legacy on the first and third Thursday at 8 p.m. here with the Crew Podcast. I really encourage our sisters and brothers to tune in for a special bonus broadcast on Pan-African Women's Day on July 31st. I have a special guest. I think you heard their name, their royal name, and prayerfully you'll be able to join us. So tune in if you have questions. Feel free to contact us at AST Speaks at gmail.com. And if you'd like any other information, you can feel free to leave a note here in the chat. You can go to our YouTube page. You can go to our Facebook page at AST Speaks. You can look at my Tanzera Kahina page, and or just let our crew know that you're willing to link with Queen Mother, Dr. Tanzera. Remember, culture heals humanity, land is our foundation, and spiritual harmony unifies us. We are the ones that bring forth culture healing, arts, technology, and spirituality for life, inspiration, freedom, and edification. And I'm always honored to be able to share this in the Crew podcast platform and network. Until our next broadcast, live free. Please live safe and always live well while having a purpose. Freedom. We need freedom. Oh, yes, I want freedom. I want freedom. Have a purpose in all you do. Just make sure that your purpose is true. Have a purpose in this here life, so your life ain't full of strife. I live a purpose each and every day, so we can live in Yahweh. I have a purpose in all you do. Just make sure your life is true. What's up and good night, everyone. Until our next broadcast, stay well, be safe, and do